Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So we've got a special edition of Van Chats today, and we've been asked by John and Mandy if we would do a hints and tips specifically aimed at Europe, as they've been getting lots of questions, obviously with lockdown in England easing off and people hitting the road in their vans and or motorhomes. A lot of people are looking to travel. A lot of first-time travellers either coming over to Europe for the first time, and they've had a whole pile of questions, and they're currently, by choice, touring around England. So they've asked us to give our hints and tips
For driving in Europe.
And to answer some of the questions they've had, as well as put our own hints and tips in.
I'm John.
And I'm Mandy.
And we're from the channel John and Mandy on tour.
On tour.
And we are missing Cooper, he's back there somewhere.
Yeah.
And we thought we'd help out with this little video that is being put together by the lovely Dom and Missy.
From Those Weirdos,
yes.
As you know, because you're watching it anyway.
Yes. And it's all about people's experience of driving, essentially on the wrong side of the road, but continental kind of driving.
Yes.
We've been over with them last year. Actually earlier this year, wasn't it?
Yes.
And there are some differences in everyone's driving style, so we thought we'd do a little bit of a hints and tips. So what I'd like to say is that sometimes I get confused, and annoyingly so, by the maps and the street signs or the motorway signs or the road names being different, because one road might be called the A6, it might be called the E412, and then the B783 or something like that, and you can't really grasp what's going on
or why it's going on.
Yeah, and what they are is they're regional, local and European road numbers. So say for example they might say the A6, well that's a motorway, so that's a regional or national road. The B number would be that road's only going to exist for a short period of time before it then turns into another road, and the E could be that road crosses multiple different countries, so it's a European road.
They normally do a handoff as well, don't they?
Yep.
So as soon as you go over a country demarcation line, so to speak, then it will flip again and change name from there.
So the A number will change, but the E number will stay.
It'll stay the same. So
that's one thing we found. And what was yours? Yours was about a petrol station that caught us out once, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, I know filling up's filling up at the end of the day. You know which side of the van your fuel pump is, or your fuel hole.
You fill it neck. You can't take them anywhere, really, can you?
You fill a cap. You know which side of the van that's on, don't you?
Hopefully.
And hopefully what it's called as well.
Yeah, that helps. Especially in France.
But on our travels, we fell foul of a couple of different things. A lot of the pumps nowadays have got the little screens on them, so you can choose how you're going to pay.
Yeah.
We found pay at pump is great. You put it on, it says you've got like 99 euros maximum or whatever it is, and then it just takes off what you use on the card, pretty much like over here.
Yeah.
If it says prepay, it takes off 100 euros.
Yeah.
It doesn't just kind of earmark it. And we found we use Revolut cards, so like the prepaid banking cards that you load up, and there was 100 euros on it. That was like the spends or whatever we had allocated. We put it on there and it wiped it clean.
Yeah.
And it was 4 days.
No, it was 4 days before we could let them know that we had to let them know. 4 days to let them know that obviously that transaction had failed. Essentially the pump couldn't deliver the fuel, so there was an error at the pump.
Yeah.
So we had to wait 4 days, and then we had to wait I think it was 2 weeks to actually get
that money back. So if it's a Visa card or you've got a big stack of cash in there,
yep,
then you might not worry about it quite so much. But if you haven't got that much money there, or it's a prepaid card, they literally take that right off you straight away.
I think the issue with ours was it was prepay.
Yeah.
Because I think it was a bank card, it would have happened automatically.
Yeah.
So just bear that in mind. If you've got a prepaid card by the co-op or like Revolut Our Card,
yeah,
and
post office do one, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, just watch it if it does say prepay, because it does actually take that, it reduces your balance and it doesn't sort itself out. We did it once since then, and then we figured it out, didn't we? And it did take 100 euros, but then it was something like 77 euros, so we got 27 euros back. And it's a very strange way of working it.
It's a bit odd.
Yeah.
Right
So
then.
we went and paid in the kit.
Yeah, just go and pay inside
Yeah,
whenever I
seems
can.
like the easiest way.
Right, so I'll hand you back to Dom and Missy, who will carry on with all their lovely travel tips now, because they are actually in France.
No, they're not.
They're in Spain now, aren't they?
all right. We're in Wales and
we're
they're in
Wales.
Spain.
Well, we're still out of the country.
Yeah, we're in a different country. Yay!
Right, take care, everyone. See you
See you
soon.
soon. Bye.
So first of all, one of my biggest hints and a tip would be to make sure that you have a fridge so that you can keep your beers cold. So here's one that I've prepared, which I've started drinking. Cheers. So it's also a special edition because this is the first time we've done a van chat outside, and we're parked up in a little area in, I guess it's a mountain kind of area on the edge of a lake in the south of France, and we're waiting to meet up with our friends driving Didi, and they've broken down in France, so they're getting their van repaired, and then they're going to join us shortly.
Overtaking. When you're driving in Europe and you want to overtake. I can't answer any of these because I don't drive, so I'm just asking questions today.
So,
Whoa!
Whoa, that's a big creature. Wow.
Don't go in my drink! Go away!
is
I don't know!
It's a big thing.
Shoo!
Wow.
Go away, it's not
Oh,
flowers.
he's cute. He's like
He
a
is really
Maybug
cute.
type thing.
Oh, alright, he's nice.
Sorry, we've had to interrupt the van chat
He's so cute.
as we have
Oh,
a
don't poke him.
I was gonna pick him up.
flying creature.
Yeah.
Trying to attack the
Yeah,
thing.
there you go. He's very cute. Okay, he's alright now.
So overtaking in Europe, I guess I could start with saying for those of you that are setting off in your van or motorhome for the first time, you maybe haven't driven on the right or you're wary of driving a big vehicle. First of all, to say that when we bought our van, I'd never driven a van, I'd never driven a motorhome, but I had driven a car on the right side of the road in Lanzarote. And I found the change very simple because you're already on the right side of the road. So when you're on a motorway, the slow lane is obviously on the far right, equivalent of what would be the fast lane in England. And it's very straightforward really. Indicate, pull out onto the left or middle lane if you're in the motorway, do your overtaking, and then plot back into the right hand lane. On a normal road, to be honest, I rarely overtake. There's very little traffic in France particularly, but the same in Spain and Portugal I'd say. Roads are much quieter, even round big towns, so overtaking is really quite simple. So if you're behind a tractor, literally just wait for a nice bit of straight road, pull out, and Bob's your auntie.
Roundabouts.
Roundabouts, again, I guess can appear quite daunting, but in reality it's very straightforward because you're on the right hand side of the road, and as you approach the roundabout in all parts of Europe, they always have arrows indicating the direction that you go. In France there's a mandatory change in the speed limit, so as you come up to the roundabout, initially the speed drops to 70, and then 100 metres after that it drops to 50, and then it sometimes drops to 30 as well. And be wary of that because it's quite easy to go faster than that and still be able to stop safely, but being sneaky, because in France particularly there are speed cameras everywhere. They do sometimes put speed cameras in between those speed limits, so you might be coming off an 80-kilometre limit down to 70, down to 50, and there'll be a speed camera between the 70 and the 50, and if you're doing 60 you get a ticket. So take it nice and slow. The roundabouts are generally always marked well in advance, say, you know, with a symbol of a roundabout and 200 metres, so you've got plenty of time to prepare. Wouldn't worry about it at all, very straightforward.
Toll booths. We don't take toll roads unless we were in a real hurry to get from A to B. But generally you get a nicer drive on the free roads anyway. It takes you through the countryside, whereas the toll road takes you straight and it's kind of on the motorway. So
yeah, I see a lot of people posting on Facebook, and I think it's probably true of quite a lot of John and Mandy's viewers who are maybe in motorhomes, and quite often heading to a campsite for a longer period of time rather than travelling around to free park-ups, wild camping or airs like us. So in that case, I quite often see the need to get from England to the campsite as quick as possible.
True. Yeah. If you've only got a couple of weeks holiday, then you just want to get there fast. So then
Yep.
a toll road might be worth it.
So in France it's very simple because you can buy tickets online for your entire journey or part of your journey, but all of the toll roads have toll booths, either with a lady or gentleman that you can give cash or card to. More often than not they're automated, again very straightforward. You just pull up to the barrier, lean out the window, put your card in, and it charges you for that section of the toll road.
Of course, when you lean out the window, it is usually your passenger. So if
Yeah.
you're travelling on your own, that's worth noting that you have to shunt over because the booth's over there.
That's right, yeah. But again, France particularly easy. Portugal, as an example, is not quite the same. And what happens in Portugal is as you come across the border, assuming you're entering Portugal on a relatively main road, there is like a tourist pullover for tolls, and then you pay for a card or access to the online website, and then you basically travel around for the whole of your time in Portugal, and you pay your bill either as you go or at the end. Now we've missed those sometimes, and it's very easy in Portugal to inadvertently find yourself on a toll road. We did that when we were travelling, funnily enough, with John and Mandy, and you didn't really know you were going to join the toll road until it suddenly just became a toll road. So Portugal is worth a little bit of extra research, and there are 3 toll companies primarily in Portugal. It's not the same as France. So in different parts of Portugal you might have to pay different websites for your tolls, so that's worth some research before you set off.
It was really easy to find the information. I just popped on Google and searched toll roads Portugal, or toll roads France, toll roads Spain, and it brings you up a wealth of websites that tell you all you need to know.
Yeah.
But easy to pay for and easy to avoid as well. There's always big signs saying péage, and it will let you know that you've got a chance to get off if you don't want to pay. Speed limits for weather and entering villages.
Okay. Right. Speed limits. France. On the surface, it's a bit of a nightmare. As I mentioned earlier, firstly, there are many speed cameras, way more than the UK. In some places, they're absolutely everywhere, even a couple of 100 yards apart. And the speed limits, particularly if you've Googled for advice, there's a lot of misinformation and it can appear very complicated, but the long short is it's actually not that difficult when you get your head around it. So when you're on a small, what we would class as A or B road in the UK, every time you come to a village, the speed limit will drop from either 80 or 90 to 70, same as a roundabout, and then after the 70 drop there will be a village sign, which is the name of the village with the sign with a red ring around it, and as soon as you pass that sign the speed limit automatically in every single town and village drops to 50 kilometres an hour, which is just over 34 miles an hour, something like that. So easy to remember, as soon as you go into the sign you drop to 50, and then as you're coming out the village or town there'll be another sign exactly the same but with a line through it, and then the speed immediately raises back to 70, and then thereafter to 80 or 90 depending on the size of the road. So in France they also have a habit of dropping and raising the speed limits in ridiculously short distances for bizarre reasons that I have yet to work out.
Yeah, you found that quite stressful the very first time we drove through France, didn't you?
Yeah.
It was really confusing.
And I couldn't quite work out what speed I was supposed to be doing. So looking at the different types of road, if you're on a rural road, the speed is generally 80 kilometres an hour, unless it's particularly windy, and then it might be 70. If it's got hairpin bends, then the bends are generally 50, but you'll normally find those are marked. If it's a larger single carriageway road, then the speed limit will be 80 or 90 kilometres an hour. Maximum speed limit on any single carriage road is 90, and again that's marked, but they do go up and down like a yo-yo. There are many roundabouts in parts of France as well. And then on a motorways are slightly different, because quite often in France the motorways are dual carriageway and not 3 lanes. So normally speaking, a dual carriageway motorway, the top speed is 120 in fine weather, 110 when it's raining, and on a larger motorway it will go as high as 130 kilometres an hour, which is around about 80 miles per hour when it's sunny or fine weather, and then down to 110 when it's raining. If you're in a particularly big vehicle over 3.5 tonnes, then that does drop by 10 kilometres an hour. So if the speed limit is 120, then you should go at 110. And additionally, on some roads, particularly for some reason in the middle of France, they like to put an 80 kilometre an hour limit on vehicles 3.5 tonnes or above, but they're clearly signposted. But in reality, if you're going to be driving a fair amount in Europe, after a few days to a week, you soon get the hang of it. Spain and Portugal, very few speed cameras, less than England, and a much more laid-back approach to driving. But worth a quick mention to say that in Spain particularly, they have some perhaps unusual rules, but quite sensible on the basis that they get a lot of tourists. So there are fines if you drive in flip-flops, there are fines if you drive unshirted or bare-topped, there are fines if you drink water or Red Bull or Coke or whatever you happen to be drinking whilst driving. There's a large fine for your passenger if they put their feet on the dashboard when you drive. Yeah, it's €1,000 fine. If you're caught with your feet up on the dash,
I do that all the
like
time.
this for comforts, which is quite easily done in a Moho. So it's worth bearing those in mind. Personally, I tend to ignore. I quite often drink water or Red Bull while I'm driving, but I do keep an eye out. One of my hints and a tip, when we left the UK, which is now well over a year ago, isn't it? We live in our van full time, so we're full-time travellers. And we wanted to get to Portugal, and we drove like the clappers, didn't we? We drove hundreds and hundreds of kilometres a day, sometimes 4, 5, 6, even 7 hours one day to get to Portugal. So my first tip is, unless you're on a very limited time scale, is drive slow and appreciate the beautiful things you can see on the way. There's so much to do through France, Spain and Portugal, wherever you're ending up. It applies to anywhere you're going. If you've got the time, go slow. It's also more economical and costs you less in the long run, or you can do more for less, so to speak. So drive slow. Secondly, for those of you that are van lifers or motorhomers that are looking to coin the phrase wild camp or stay at airs, we had this kind of thing in our head based on what we'd seen online, that if you were wild camping, i.e. staying in an unofficial air at the side of a beach or in the mountains or whatever, that it was polite and generally considered that you should only stay the one night. I don't know where we got that from, but a lot of people seem to have that same viewpoint. We don't do that anymore. So if it's particularly nice, particularly quiet, particularly beautiful, whatever it might be, it's by a lake, by the sea, whatever, we stay 2, 3, 4 days. We've got friends who travel even slower than us and stay 2 to 4 weeks in the same place. And there's so much to see, and there's just no rush. So take it slow, stay a long time if you like somewhere, enjoy what there is to see.
I've got another tip.
Yeah.
Check your nuts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like to check my nuts quite regularly.
It's important to check your nuts.
It is important to check your nuts, yes. It's very important. And we're not talking almonds here, or gentlemen's nuts, we're talking van nuts, aren't we?
Yes,
van nuts.
the wheel nuts.
See, a little bit of background to that. Maybe it's because I'm a bit of a moron. But it's not something I'd ever considered, because when you're a car driver, the only time you check your wheel nuts is when you change your wheel, or you need a new tyre, or you go to the garage to get your tyre changed. I've never ever in my entire life, 20 years of driving, checked my nuts. So I bought my van, we got a new set of tyres, we headed off, and we drove around quite happily for a year. No problems, and then a few weeks back we were in England. Luckily we were on a very small road, so we were coming through a village. We were only doing about 20 miles an hour, but our wheel came off. Luckily it didn't come off to the point where it left the van, but it was literally a few seconds.
It shuddered, and when I looked in my rear view,
Yeah.
my wing mirror, the wheel was literally doing that. So
Yeah.
that was very scary. We managed to pull over. And, yeah.
So essentially with the vibration, obviously exasperated by the fact that we quite often go off-road and we go down little country gravel tracks out on the sticks, the vibration obviously over time, the nuts had worked loose, and then we went over a pothole in England and nearly lost our wheel. So although it didn't do any major damage to the van, it basically, our wheel was scrap. So it cost us.
And it could have damaged the van.
It could,
Could have,
yeah.
if the wheel had
Yeah,
come
yeah,
off, could
yeah.
have damaged the axle and all the stuff underneath. It would have been.
So that's our torque kit. So right, you've got numbers down here, which is the torque. So our van should be somewhere either 120 to 140, 140 being tighter than 120. So before we left, we did them at 140. So I'm going to adjust the torque wrench to 140. There we go, so that's adjusted to 140. So those ones are all fine. And more often than not, they're going to be fine. Or more often than not, they're going to be fine, but they just needed a slight tighten. So apparently what happens, particularly when you're like us and you spend a lot of time going to remote park-ups, roads can be a bit bumpy, and over time the nuts can work loose through the vibrations. Doesn't sound particularly safe when you put it like that, but if you check them regularly, then you'll avoid the problem that we had. And to be fair, I hadn't checked my nuts for at least 6 months. This is laughing at that one. So remember, gentlemen, check your nuts regularly to make sure they're functioning.
Is there anything else that you need to look at and keep an eye on?
As a driver, I check my van every time we leave a park-up. So I check the tyres to make sure that they're all properly inflated in terms of a visual check. I quite often have a quick look under the van just to make sure there's no leaks. I clean all the windows and the wing mirrors because there's a lot of bugs now the weather's hot. And I mean a lot of bugs, particularly when you're out in rural areas. And I generally just do a quick check. And then once a week on my van I can check my oil automatically. So on most modern vehicles you can do the same. So I can check my oil to make sure that I don't need to top it up. I can check my coolant levels. And then once every month I go in the bonnet and I do a visual check to make sure that there's no obvious leaks, that the coolant brake fluid is filled up. Just really a bit of health and safety really. And from doing that we realised that we did actually have a faulty coolant cap on our coolant reservoir, and until we could find the right cap we spent about 50 quid in coolant, because every time we drove anywhere the pressure would cause the coolant to leak and we'd then have to fill it up every couple of days.
Yep.
So an obvious perhaps tip, but do a quick check around your vehicle just to make sure there's nothing obvious that you need to look into, perhaps at a garage.
I've got another tip. It's not so much driving in Europe, but if you're travelling in your campervan or Moho, then you're going to have a store of water on board and possibly LPG. And a little tip would be to, every time you see somewhere that you can fill up with water, even if you don't think to fill up, you need to fill up with water, go and fill up, get a little bit. It's much better to keep topping up little bits than to deplete until suddenly actually there isn't anywhere near you that you can get water from. And the same for LPG. We don't use much, and our LPG can last for months. But if we're driving along and we see a petrol station that says, they call it GPL over here, so if it says GPL then we'll pull in and top up with it just in case, because you never know when you're going to see another place that has it.
Absolutely, wise.
Yeah. We wanted to say that we left the UK and travelled to France very, very, very soon after the borders were open again, and we were officially allowed to leave and cross into France. And we made a video all about the crossing, but in brief it was fine. We had printed out a declaration that we had to sign to say that we self-certificated that we didn't have COVID or symptoms. We didn't need to show them. We did not need to quarantine. Nobody told us anything about needing to do anything. We literally drove onto the Eurotunnel earlier than our allotted time because we got there early, and we drove off at the other side. All we had to do was show our passports, and we're in France. There's no quarantine. There's no panic here. It's fine. The airs are all open. The electricity's working. The water is on. Everybody's being friendly and lovely. We've spoken to loads of French people now and been into supermarkets. We wear our masks in the supermarket to be polite, but a lot of people in supermarkets don't, do they? You know, the majority of the French people here aren't wearing masks. Certainly not when they're walking around in the streets, but also not in the supermarkets. So you can if you want to feel safe, and that's fine.
Yeah, everyone's very relaxed. Not relaxed in the sense of not taking precautions, because I think there's a new normal here. So the French are going about their normal day-to-day business, which, without insulting the French, involves a lot of socialisation, bars, wines, dinners, and so on. But they are social distancing in the main. They are being sensible, and it is just quite pleasant. It's very relaxed. We've driven past many gendarmes. We've not been stopped. We had a chat with a gendarme at one of our park-ups the other night. He didn't ask us any questions about COVID or anything. Just hello, how are you? Are you okay? All fine. Big smiles, no problems.
Yep.
So I'm still seeing on Facebook people being very cautious. Either because they want to protect themselves, or because they're worried that they won't get in, or there'll be issues, or that everything's closed. And it really, honestly, it's fine.
Yeah.
Everything is basically, if anything, it's probably nicer than it's been before. I think people are so, because the lockdown in France was very harsh, much harder than England. So I think people are just happy that they can get back to some form of normality. Yep. Everyone's very happy.
Don't panic. Come over. The weather is lovely.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. You have nothing to fear. It's absolutely stunning. Weather is great. People are happy. Everything's cool. Get in your van. Get in your motorhome. Book the tunnel. Book your ferry if they're still running. Get over here and enjoy.
That's it.
That's it.
Bob's your auntie.
Yeah, but I do have an auntie called Bob. Thanks for watching. And if you've got any other questions or any more in-depth stuff you'd like to know, just pop it in the comments down here, and we answer all comments, so we'll get straight back to you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.
I got nothing.